This injury bug that started last year, it struck us again even before spring training. So James Paxton goes down. He has back surgery to alleviate a herniated lumbar disc. So right from the get-go, you have James Paxton, who finished on a very high level last year, ladies and gentlemen. You heard me talking about him last year. Anybody who follows the show, you know I have a website for the last 5 years, and I've probably written about 150 columns. If you look at the subject matter that I talked about most up to this point, it has been pitching, and I have spoken about Severino, and I've spoken about Michael Pineda, and I'll get to that in 1 second. And I'm watching Paxton last year doing something that was driving me crazy because he's struggling and he's throwing fastballs and cut fastballs, and I'm saying you got to mix in that third pitch. He goes over and he starts throwing with consistency that slow looping curveball at 82 miles an hour. It made all the difference in the world. He, in August and September, completely different pitcher. I think he won 10 wins in a row. Postseason in the ALCS with the season on the line, Game 5, pitched fantastic 6 innings. But the point of the matter is he goes down with an injury, and now I'm basically looking at this and I'm going to say, once again, in my opinion, Luis Severino is the key to the season. I wrote a column and I called it, What's the Difference? When I analyze starting pitchers, the first thing that I look at, or one of the first things, is the difference in velocity from his highest to his lowest velocity pitch in his repertoire. Obviously, command of the strike zone, different type pitches, movement, late life, those are key. We all understand that. But in my opinion, the overall variance in speed is a huge factor. And for the most part, many times, and I'll say over the last decade, this was overlooked by the Yankees. And case in point, anybody who watches this show heard me talking about Severino, and before that Pineda, and I kept on saying, fastball slider, fastball slider. And my point was that they're throwing their fastball at 95, 96 miles an hour. They're throwing their slider at 90 miles an hour. They're throwing their changeup at 89 miles an hour. And there wasn't enough variance. They weren't throwing their changeup often enough. And when they did throw it, there's not enough variance. So with this being the off season, what I did is I said, let me drill down a little bit. I pride myself on my analytics, but one of the things that I did is I said, let me take a look and let me see if what I've been preaching, and you have to remember, ladies and gentlemen, that when it gets to Severino, I was screaming on this TV show that what Severino was lacking was his changeup that he had when he was in the minor leagues. I'm even throwing it out there. I'm showing graphics where you can see that scouts, how they had it rated, that his fastball was his best pitch and his changeup was his second best pitch. It was a plus pitch. You remember that, Anthony? Yeah. I mean, and I was saying it before, Girardi, before anybody, on the Yankees was even talking about it. And so now what I'm saying here is that Severino becomes incredibly important. Even though the Yankees went out and got Gerrit Cole, they still need another ace, just like last year when you had Scherzer and Strasburg. I took a look at what I considered elite pitchers. I put a group together of 6 pitchers. And what I kind of handpicked them, and I picked Strasburg, Gerrit Cole, Greinke, Chris Sale, Scherzer, and Verlander. All elite pitchers. They've all pitched in the World Series over the last 3 years. Most of them have World Series rings. The Yankees could have traded for any one of these guys. The only one who didn't bounce around to get traded was Strasburg. But Cole was was a trade and now a free agent. Greinke was a trade. Sale was a trade. Scherzer was a free agent signing in 2015. Verlander, we all know, in 17. So you get the idea. And what I did, ladies and gentlemen, I think you're going to find this interesting. I took their entire body of work, their career stats, So it averaged out to each one of these 6 pitchers averaged out to over 11 years, okay, of pitching. That's a long time. What I came up with was if you took their average fastball, these 6 elite pitchers, their average fastball was 94.3 miles an hour. Then I took their average slowest off-speed pitch. And let me be very clear about this. It could have been, in one case, let's say Chris Sale, it could have been a slider. Okay, in someone else's case, it could have been a curveball. In someone else's case, it could have been a changeup. Let's say Greinke could have been the changeup.
Differential.
I looked at, right, and what I came up with, when you looked at their slowest pitch and you put it all together, their average slowest pitch was 78.95 miles per hour.
So a very big difference.
Right. When you look at these 6 elite pitchers, the difference was 15.35 miles an hour for their career. Okay, so that's a big sample size. Now, interestingly enough, the 2 guys that I singled out for most of the decade, and we didn't make the World Series this decade with the Yankees, and it frustrated me because I thought that Pineda and certainly with Severino, you get these guys pitching to the top of the game, and it makes all the difference in the world. Pineda, it proved out, ladies and gentlemen, for his career, his fastest pitch was his fastball, 93.5 miles an hour. His slider, 84.9 miles per hour. His differential was 8.6 miles per hour. Luis Severino, his fastball, 97.1 miles an hour. His slowest pitch was his changeup, 87.9. So his differential was 9.2. So here I'm going to put a bow on it, ladies and gentlemen. When you look at those 6 elite pitchers and you combine them, you have 15.35 miles an hour. When you combine Severino and Pineda, they're almost identical. I called them Pineda-Reno, if you remember, right? When you combine them, you're talking about a differential of 8.9 miles per hour. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. You're looking at, and again, it kind of validated what I've been saying, and again, it's my own little brand of analytics, but I'll say this. When you look at elite pitchers and a difference of 15 miles an hour, and then you look at a difference of 9 miles an hour, okay, that's a 50% difference if you look at those 2 numbers, if you will. And the other thing I want to mention is the slowest pitch of the elite pitchers was 78.9 miles an hour. That's a huge deal, ladies and gentlemen. That's a big deal because batters are ramped up. They're looking for 90 plus miles an hour. When they get a pitch that's 78 miles an hour, they're way out in front. When Pineda and Severino, more importantly, when he's throwing his changeup 89 miles an hour, it's not enough variance to have that guy, way out in front. So here's what I want to say. I was screaming about it. I've written columns. You can go back to my website and you can see from the first game that he pitched, I wrote a column. The first game that he pitched, I talked about his changeup. And I was relentless in 2016. When he was 0-8, I still believed in him. And I said, he's got to throw the changeup, he's got to dial it back, and he needs late life. By dialing back, he's got to turn his wrist over slightly. It's almost like a screwball, but it's a circle change. He's got to turn his wrist over. It's called pronating. And what that does is it creates sink and it creates fade away from a lefty, which is the opposite direction of his slider. This is crucial. And the reason why I'm saying this is I even suggested on this show, go talk to Pedro Martinez. Remember, and he talks to Pedro Martinez. He becomes a Cy Young candidate in 2017. But in 2018, I'm watching him during spring training, and he's blowing guys away with 99 mile an hour heat. Now, we know last year in 2019, he didn't even pitch during spring training because he was injured from spring training forward. He missed almost the entire year. What I'm saying, this is what I'm saying to Matt Blake, anybody on the Yankees that wants to listen. And he's not done this yet, but I want to see him do it this spring training. Matt, take Severino and say to him, you're going to throw 60 pitches today in a spring training game that means nothing against the Philadelphia Phillies. You're going to throw 60 pitches. I want to see 20 changeups, 20 sliders, 20 fastballs. I don't want to see you sprinkle in the changeup. I want to see you throw 20 pitches. That's what I want to see, ladies and gentlemen. You guys know I watch this spring training very closely. That's what I want to see because he's key.